An autistic little boy overhears something horrible from a famous city millionaire. But when the boy questions why the millionaire did it, he cruelly pushes the boy who couldn't swim off the bridge, making him fall into the river. Yet what the horse does next left everyone speechless. Before we dive in, if you, like us, are animal lovers, hit that subscribe button now so you don't miss a single heartwarming story. Thanks. Now, back to our story. The afternoon sun painted the sky above Harmony Creek with shades of orange and gold as Billy carefully adjusted the lens of his old camera. His nimble fingers moved with precision over the vintage equipment, a cherished gift he carried as if it were a part of himself. At 11 years old, Billy saw the world in a unique way through that lens, capturing details that the other residents of the small rural town seemed to miss. Beside him, Star, his loyal horse, grazed peacefully. The animal wasn't young anymore. Her graying mane betrayed her advanced age, but her eyes still shone with the same sweetness as always when they met Billy's. The connection between the two was something beyond words, a silent understanding, a friendship that transcended the communication barriers that Billy's autism sometimes created. From the porch of the small farmhouse, Mary watched her son with a mixture of love and concern. Her rough hands, marked by years of working as a housekeeper for Mrs. Vanderbilt, nervously clutched her apron. Her recent layoff still weighed heavily on her heart, along with the bills piling up on the kitchen table. John, her husband, was in the barn, spending another afternoon caring for Star, nurturing a dream that seemed increasingly distant. Billy raised his camera, aiming at the clouds drifting lazily across the sky. Through the lens, the world gained its own order, making more sense than the complex social interactions that so often challenged him. The camera had been a gift from Mrs. Vanderbilt when his mother still worked at the wealthy woman's estate. It was an old model, but for Billy, it was a magic portal that allowed him to share his unique view of the world. The distant sound of hooves on the dirt road caught everyone's attention. A luxurious black Lincoln Town car snaked down the road leading to town, kicking up a cloud of red dust. Billy lowered his camera and watched the vehicle with curiosity. He knew that this meant only one thing: Victor Monroe had come to town. The news of the famous soap opera actor's arrival would quickly spread throughout Harmony Creek. Victor was the local pride, the boy who had left the small town and achieved stardom. Every year, he returned to organize a grand equestrian event that attracted competitors and dreamers from all over the region. The prizes were tempting enough to make anyone's eyes sparkle with the possibility of a better life. John emerged from the barn at the sound of the commotion. His eyes met Mary's, and a silent current of understanding passed between them. Billy, absorbed in his photography, didn't notice the meaningful exchange between his parents. He had no idea that at that moment, an important decision was being made, a decision that would change the course of their lives. The sun was beginning to set when John finally mustered the courage to share his plans. He gathered the family on the porch, his favorite place for important conversations. Mary sat in the old rocking chair, while Billy remained standing, his camera hanging around his neck like a protective amulet. Mary brought her hands to her face, torn between fear and hope. Billy, in turn, approached Star, who had come closer to the porch as if understanding the importance of the moment. The boy hugged the animal's neck, his fingers entwined in her graying mane. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the wind in the leaves of the trees and Star's soft whinny. At that moment, none of them could imagine that they were about to become involved in a plot much larger than a simple equestrian competition. Fate had begun to weave its threads, intertwining their lives with secrets that the small town of Harmony Creek held in its dusty streets. Billy raised his camera again, capturing the exact moment when the last ray of sun tinged the sky red. The old lens focused on Star's silhouette against the horizon, creating an image that would later prove more significant than anyone could have predicted. It was the beginning of a journey that would test not only their courage, but also the deep bonds that united a family and their small rural town. The weeks following the announcement of the competition completely transformed the family's routine. John dedicated every free moment to training Star, waking up before sunrise and ending his days long after the moon had taken its place in the sky. The old horse, though not as agile as the younger specimens that would certainly participate in the event, showed a surprising willingness, as if understanding the importance of the moment for her owners. Billy watched everything through his camera, recording every progress, every moment of connection between his father and Star. The photographs piled up in a special box under his bed, forming a visual diary of those days of hope and preparation. Mary, in turn, sewed at night, mending John's old riding suit, determined to make her husband present himself with dignity at the competition. The news that the Silver family would participate in the event with their old horse spread quickly through town. Some people showed support, like Mr. Anderson from the grocery store, who began saving the best carrots and apples for Star. Others, however, didn't hide their skepticism, whispering in corners about how foolish it was to believe that a horse of that age could compete against the thoroughbreds that would certainly come to the event. "Don't pay attention to what they say," Mary whispered to John every night, massaging his sore shoulders after another intense day of training. "They don't know Star like we know her." Mary, who was hanging clothes on the clothesline, froze at the sight of her former employer. Billy, who was photographing the clouds that morning, lowered his camera slowly, his eyes fixed on the imposing figure approaching. The boy still had good memories of the lady who had given him his precious camera. "I came to see how the preparations are going," Mrs. Vanderbilt announced, her tone surprisingly gentle. "And also, well, Mary, I miss you. The new housekeeper doesn't know how to make that cornmeal cake like you did." The silence that followed was loaded with unspoken emotions. Mary nervously twisted the dish towel in her hands, while John dismounted Star, cautiously approaching the group. Billy, in his corner, raised his camera again, capturing that moment of tension with his unique sensitivity. "I've been watching your efforts, John," Mrs. Vanderbilt continued, turning to the sweaty and dusty man, "and I brought something that might help." With a gesture, she called her driver, who removed a brand new saddle from the trunk of the car, along with various training equipment. "Yes, you can," she interrupted firmly. "Consider it an investment. When you win, I just want you to remember your old friends." That night, after Mrs. Vanderbilt left, hope seemed more palpable in the small farmhouse. During dinner, John spoke with renewed enthusiasm about his strategies for the competition, while Mary allowed herself to smile more openly, as she hadn't done in weeks. Billy, sitting in his usual place at the table, watched his parents attentively. Even with his difficulties in interpreting facial expressions, he could feel the change in the atmosphere. He picked up his camera and, breaking his usual routine of not photographing during meals, recorded that moment of family happiness. Later, as the family prepared for bed, a distant sound of music and laughter reached them from town. Victor Monroe's mansion, lit up like a Christmas tree, welcomed the first important guests for the week of the competition. Billy, from his bedroom window, photographed the distant lights, unaware that he would soon discover that not all that glitters is gold, and that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in the most unlikely places. The town of Harmony Creek was experiencing its busiest days of the year. The once quiet streets now throbbed with the energy of the visitors arriving for the equestrian competition. Luxury cars and dusty pickup trucks shared space on the narrow streets, while horses of different breeds and values were unloaded from gleaming trailers. Billy watched all this through his camera, recording every detail of that transformation. On a particularly busy afternoon, Billy decided to take Star for his usual ride along the less-traveled paths around town. It was his favorite time of day, when he could escape the growing hustle and bustle and explore the quiet corners. He so enjoyed photographing. The horse knew the way well, her hooves marking a gentle rhythm on the dirt road. While crossing a more remote area near the old abandoned warehouse of the former co-op, something unusual caught Billy's attention. A black Lincoln Town car, identical to the one he had seen days before, was parked discreetly behind the dilapidated building. The boy's heart raced when he recognized Victor Monroe getting out of the vehicle, looking nervously around. Billy guided Star behind an old tree, his hands trembling slightly as he raised his camera. Through the lens, he observed a second figure emerging from the shadows of the warehouse. Crooked Joe, a man that everyone in town avoided. His nickname came not only from his hunched posture, but also from his questionable reputation. Billy's photographic instinct, sharpened by years of practice, made him press the shutter button several times, capturing the sequence of events unfolding before him. Victor handed a thick envelope to Crooked Joe, who in turn passed the actor a small black-covered notebook. The conversation between them was whispered, but some stray words reached Billy's attentive ears. "No one can know." Victor's response sounded tense, worried. "If they find out..." Billy quickly put the camera in his protective bag and mounted Star. The old horse, understanding the urgency of the moment, set off in a smooth but firm gallop, moving away from the location before they could be discovered. "Did something happen, son?" she asked, approaching with concern. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Billy carefully removed the photos from the camera and hid them in a special box, different from the one where he kept his usual photographs. His heart told him that those images were important, even if he didn't fully understand why yet. Outside, the full moon illuminated the fields of the small farm, and Star rested quietly in her stable. But the apparent peace hid a storm that was approaching. In town, lights still shone in Victor Monroe's mansion, where dark plans were being woven under the guise of an honest competition. Billy had trouble sleeping that night, his mind replaying the events of the day. For the first time, his photographs were not just records of beauty and special moments. They were silent witnesses of something he did not yet fully understand, but that made his heart clench with a feeling of worry about the future. The next morning dawned with a thin fog blanketing Harmony Creek, as if nature itself wanted to hide the small town's secrets. John left early for work at the auto repair shop while Mary prepared breakfast, trying to disguise her concern about Billy's strange behavior the night before. Billy woke up earlier than usual, his hands instinctively reaching for the camera beside his bed. The images he had captured the day before weighed on his conscience like precious and dangerous stones. During the night, he had dreamed of the whispered conversation between Victor and Crooked Joe, and the words "bets" and "arranged" echoed in his mind like a distant bell. After breakfast, while helping his mother feed the chickens, Billy noticed an unusual commotion on the road. A group of elegantly dressed riders approached the property. At the head of the group, mounted on a majestic black horse, was Victor Monroe himself. Mary hurried to wipe her hands on her apron, embarrassed by the unexpected visit. Billy instinctively retreated behind his mother, his camera hanging around his neck like a protective shield. Star, in the nearby pasture, raised her head and watched the scene attentively. "Ah, but I didn't just come for John," Victor smiled, his eyes fixing on Billy. "I heard we have a talented young photographer around here. What an interesting camera you have there, kid." "Billy is shy around strangers," Mary explained, placing a protective hand on her son's shoulder. "And yes, he loves photography. It was a very special gift." Before Mary could intervene, a loud whinny cut through the air. Star had approached, positioning herself strategically between Billy and the visitors. The old horse kept her head raised, her eyes fixed on Victor with an unusual intensity. "Star is stronger than she looks." Billy's voice surprised everyone, including his mother. It was rare for him to speak to strangers, but something about the way Victor looked at his horse made him react. When the riders finally left, Mary hugged Billy tightly. "It's okay, honey. You don't have to accept anything you don't want to." At night, as the family ate dinner in silence, Billy made a decision. After his parents went to sleep, he would develop the photos of the secret meeting. He needed to better understand what he had witnessed, even if it meant facing his fears. In town, the lights of Victor Monroe's mansion shone again, and loud music echoed through the streets. But in the dark corners, other meetings were taking place. Crooked Joe met with mysterious figures exchanging envelopes and whispers, weaving a web of bets and cheating that threatened to engulf all of Harmony Creek in its darkness. In his room, Billy held his camera tightly, as if it could protect him from the secrets he had captured. Through the window, the moon illuminated the pasture where Star rested, and the boy knew that somehow his photographs had become more than just images. They were now the key to a mystery that needed to be unraveled. The night was especially dark when Billy sneaked out of his room, carrying his precious camera and a small flashlight. The boy had waited patiently until his father's soft snores indicated that his parents were sound asleep. With silent steps, he headed to the small shed in the back of the house where John kept his tools and where Billy had secretly set up a small makeshift photographic lab. His knowledge of photo development came from long hours studying an old manual he had found with the camera, a gift from Mrs. Vanderbilt. His hands moved with precision in the dark, guided by familiarity and the need to discover the truth hidden in his negatives. While he worked, Billy could hear the nocturnal sounds of the farm, the occasional hoot of an owl, the rustling of leaves in the wind, and the soft movements of Star in her stable. These familiar sounds calmed him as he immersed the photographs in the chemical solutions, eager to see what he had really captured that afternoon at the abandoned warehouse. The images began to gradually emerge on the photographic paper, first as indistinct shadows, then revealing increasingly sharp details. Billy's heart raced as he saw the scene materializing before his eyes. There was Victor Monroe, his normally charming expression replaced by something more sinister, handing a thick envelope to Crooked Joe. The black notebook in the actor's hands was clearly visible, as were the numbers and notes that Billy had managed to capture in one of the more fortunate clicks. A sudden noise made Billy freeze. Someone had just passed by the shed window. The boy quickly turned off his flashlight, his heart beating so loudly that it seemed everyone on the farm could hear him. Seconds later, whispered voices reached his ears. "Are you sure this is where the kid went in?" Crooked Joe's hoarse voice was unmistakable. A loud, sudden whinny cut through the night. Star had sensed the intruders. The sound was followed by furious barking from Rex, the neighbor's dog, creating an unexpected commotion. Billy heard whispered curses and the sound of hurried footsteps moving away. Billy waited several minutes after the sounds disappeared before daring to move. Carefully, he stored the still damp photographs in a special folder, protecting them between sheets of paper. His heart was still racing when he finally left the shed. Lying in his bed much later, Billy couldn't sleep. The images he had developed and the visit from the mysterious men swirled in his mind like a frightening carousel. For the first time, he fully understood the danger he was in. It wasn't just about pretty photographs or a competition anymore. There was something much bigger and scarier happening in Harmony Creek. The next morning, Mary noticed the dark circles under her son's eyes, but attributed it to nervousness about the upcoming competition. John was too busy with the final preparations for Star to notice anything different. Billy kept his secret, but he knew he needed to do something with the information he possessed. During breakfast, the kitchen radio broadcast the latest news about the grand equestrian event. Victor Monroe's voice sounded confident and charismatic as he spoke about the expectations for the competition and how happy he was to help his hometown. Billy felt his stomach turn at the sound of that voice, now knowing the true face behind the famous smile. The photographs hidden in his room weighed like lead on his conscience. Billy knew he needed to find someone he could trust, someone who understood the gravity of the situation and could help him do the right thing. But in a small town like Harmony Creek, where everyone seemed to adore Victor Monroe. Who could he trust? The following afternoon, a fine rain was falling over Harmony Creek, creating small puddles in the cobblestone streets. Billy was sitting on the porch at home, his camera in his lap, watching the drops trickle down the roof tiles. The weight of the secret he carried seemed even heavier under the grey sky. It was then that an old but well-maintained car stopped in front of the house. From the vehicle, a gentleman with greying hair and a distinguished posture emerged, carrying a black umbrella. Billy recognized him immediately. It was Detective O'Malley, a retired police officer who always greeted the boy gently when he met him in the town square. "Good afternoon," said the detective, climbing the steps of the porch with measured steps. "You must be Billy, aren't you? The young photographer everyone's talking about." "Actually," the detective replied, his gentle eyes fixed on Billy, "I came to talk to your son. I've been observing his work with the camera, and I'd like to see some of his photographs if possible." When Mary returned to the kitchen, the detective sat down in one of the chairs on the porch, next to Billy. "You know, young man," he began, his voice low and comforting, "sometimes our cameras capture more than just beautiful moments. Sometimes they record things that need to be revealed, don't they? I've been observing certain movements in the town," O'Malley continued, choosing his words carefully, "and I've noticed that you're also a keen observer. Perhaps we've seen the same things." With still trembling hands, Billy removed the photographs from their hiding place. The detective examined each image with meticulous attention, his face remaining impassive, but his eyes shining with increasing interest. The boy tilted his head, curious. The detective continued, "Since I retired, I've been discreetly investigating certain suspicious activities in our town. Victor Monroe isn't the hero everyone thinks he is, but I never got concrete proof until now. I need your help, Billy, but I want you to understand one thing. This can be dangerous. You don't have to get involved if you don't want to. I can try to solve this on my own." With a determination that surprised even himself, Billy picked up his camera and showed the detective some specific settings he had discovered. Through gestures and a few carefully chosen words, he explained how he managed to capture images even in low-light conditions. Billy nodded, feeling for the first time since he took those pictures that he was no longer alone with his secret. The detective put the photographs in a discreet folder and got up to leave. As the detective's car disappeared around the bend in the road, Billy felt a mixture of fear and hope. The rain had stopped, and a rainbow was forming on the horizon. Somehow, that seemed like a sign that despite the dangers that awaited them, the truth would eventually come to light. The day dawned with a golden light that made the town of Harmony Creek look like an antique painting. It was the last day of practice before the big competition, and a nervous energy hung in the air. Billy woke up early, as usual, but today there was something different about his routine. The camera, which normally sat on his nightstand, was carefully prepared with a fresh roll of film, ready to record any suspicious activity. John had already left with Star for a final workout in the field near the town, and Mary was at the farmer's market, buying supplies for the weekend of the event. Billy took advantage of the morning solitude to reorganize his photographs and remember Detective O'Malley's instructions. That's when he heard the unmistakable sound of a limousine approaching. His heart raced when he recognized Victor Monroe getting out of the luxurious vehicle. The actor was alone this time, and his smile seemed strangely genuine. "You know, Billy," Victor continued, his melodious voice carrying a conspiratorial tone, "I discovered an amazing place to photograph horses. It's near the old covered bridge, where the morning light creates unique reflections on the water. How about we go there? I promise it will be worth it for your photographs." Billy knew exactly which bridge Victor was talking about. It was an old structure that crossed the deepest part of the river, surrounded by ancient trees. His father had always warned him to stay away from there, especially after the rains when the current got stronger. Something about the invitation sounded an alarm in his mind, but Billy also knew that this could be a unique opportunity to find out more about Victor's plans. After a moment of hesitation, he nodded slightly, grabbing his camera and following the actor to the limousine. The driver took them silently along the dirt road that wound down to the river. Victor spoke animatedly about the competition, about how proud he was of his hometown, and how he wanted to help local talents like Billy. But there was something in his voice, a false note that the boy could perceive, even with his difficulties in interpreting emotions. When they arrived at the bridge, the sun was exactly at the angle that Victor had described, creating a spectacle of light and shadow over the waters of the river. In another situation, Billy would have been amazed by the photographic opportunity, but his attention was divided between the beauty of the scene and the growing sense of danger. Billy followed the actor with cautious steps over the old boards, the sound of the wood creaking under his feet mixed with the sound of the rushing water below. When they reached the center of the bridge, Victor stopped abruptly. Billy's heart almost stopped. How did Victor know? The boy took a step back, but the actor moved forward, his face now a mask of barely contained threat. "Don't be foolish!" Victor's voice was filled with frustration. "You don't understand what's at stake here. Give me that camera now!" Billy's scream was swallowed by the sound of rushing water as his body broke the surface of the river. The current, stronger than it seemed from above, began to drag him away. His camera, still attached to his hands, weighed like lead, pulling him down. The icy water enveloped Billy like a dark cloak as the current dragged him mercilessly. His lungs burned, and the camera, still firmly clutched in his hands, seemed to weigh a ton. The boy struggled to maintain consciousness, but the turbulent waters of the river gave no respite. It was then that a sound penetrated the water, a powerful whinny unlike any other he had ever heard before. Star, who was grazing nearby during the training with John, had witnessed everything. The old horse, moved by a protective instinct that overcame any limitation of age, did not hesitate. With a determined push, she plunged into the river. John, who was training Star a short distance away, heard the whinny and saw his horse dart toward the river. His heart froze when he spotted Billy's small figure being dragged by the current. "Oh my God, Billy!" he shouted, running toward the bank. On the bridge, Victor remained paralyzed, his face a mask of panic and guilt. Star swam with a force that defied her age, her powerful legs cutting through the water with determination. Years of coexistence and unconditional love guided every movement of the animal. Billy, almost without strength, felt something brush his arm, the familiar mane of his most faithful friend. With the last vestige of energy, Billy managed to grab onto Star's mane. The horse, feeling the boy's weight, adjusted her swimming, keeping Billy's head above water. The current was still strong, but the experience and strength of the old horse began to prevail over the fury of the river. "Hold on!" John's voice sounded distant as he ran along the bank, following the progress of Star and Billy. Other voices began to join the shouts. People passing by the road had noticed the drama unfolding in the river. "Billy, my son!" John pulled the drenched boy into his arms, tears mixing with the water streaming down their faces. Billy was trembling violently, but his fingers still gripped the camera with a steely determination. A small crowd was already forming around them. Amid the murmurs of concern and relief, someone shouted, "Call an ambulance." Another voice stood out. "Where's Victor? He was on the bridge." Mary arrived running, alerted by neighbors. Her face was pale with worry, but her arms were strong and safe as they wrapped around Billy. My son," she repeated, like a prayer of gratitude. As the ambulance approached with its siren cutting through the morning air, Billy finally allowed his fingers to relax around the camera. The equipment was soaked, possibly ruined, but something inside him knew that the photographs, the evidence, needed to be saved. "I'll take care of this personally, Billy," promised the detective, carefully taking the camera. "I know people who can help us recover what's in there." On the horizon, dark clouds began to form, foreshadowing a storm. But for Billy, lying on the ambulance stretcher with his hand still entwined in Star's wet mane, the worst storm had already passed. Now it was time to let the truth come to light, no matter how painful it was. Harmony Creek's hospital was a modest two-story building, painted in a soft shade of yellow that tried to bring some comfort to its patients. Billy was lying in a bed in the pediatric ward, watching the activity through the room's window. Outside, the afternoon sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with orange tones that reminded him of the colors of his soaked camera. Mary didn't leave her son's side, her calloused hands always nearby, adjusting the blanket, checking his temperature, offering water. John alternated between the hospital and the stable, where Star was also recovering from her heroic effort. The veterinarian had assured them that the old horse would be fine, needing only rest and special care in the coming days. It was early in the evening that Detective O'Malley appeared, carrying a brown folder and a serious expression. Beside him, a lady with glasses and grey hair carried a case that Billy immediately recognized. It was the type of equipment used by photography technicians. Mrs. Peterson approached the bed with a gentle smile. "Your equipment is very special, young man, and you have an impressive eye for photography. We managed to save not only the old images, but also some you took this morning on the covered bridge." "Son," she said softly, "the detective told us about the photographs you took, about what you discovered. Why didn't you tell us before?" Billy lowered his eyes, but the detective intervened. "He was protecting you, and he did the right thing by keeping the evidence safe." Turning to Billy, he continued, "But now we need to act. Victor has disappeared from town after the incident, but we know he hasn't gone far. The competition is tomorrow, and he has too much money involved to simply abandon everything." A soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. It was Mrs. Vanderbilt, carrying a basket of fruit and a brown envelope. Her normally composed face showed signs of worry and something more: determination. The detective raised his eyebrows, interested. Mrs. Vanderbilt continued, "For years, I've been keeping records of Victor's suspicious activities in our town. That's why I had to let Mary go. He had discovered that I was investigating and threatened to harm the people close to me. Here's everything: records of illegal bets, manipulation of results, threats to participants. Victor has turned our traditional competition into a criminal scheme, enriching himself at the expense of honest people's dreams." "But what about the competition?" asked John, who had returned to the room in time to hear the revelations. "So many families have invested their savings, trained for months." Billy watched the activity in the room with a mixture of relief and apprehension. His camera, even damaged, had fulfilled its role. It had captured the truth. Now, other people would take over the fight he had started. The boy nodded, feeling the weariness finally weigh on his eyes. Before falling asleep, his last image was of his camera, now carefully restored by Mrs. Peterson, resting on the table next to the bed. Tomorrow would be an important day, and he would be ready to record every moment, no longer as a solitary witness, but as part of something bigger, something that could finally bring justice to his small town. The night before the competition was the longest Billy had ever lived. Even though he had been discharged from the hospital on the condition that he remain at rest, the boy couldn't sleep. From his bedroom window, he watched the city lights twinkling in the distance, imagining where Victor might be and what he planned to do. Mary had improvised a bed in her son's room, refusing to leave him alone after the day's events. John spent the night in the stable with Star, standing guard. Detective O'Malley had assigned 2 officers to watch the property, their silhouettes occasionally visible in the moonlight. Around midnight, a movement caught Billy's attention. A familiar figure was crossing the pasture toward the stable. It was Crooked Joe. The boy's heart leaped. Immediately, he grabbed his restored camera and, careful not to wake his mother, positioned himself strategically by the window. Through the lens, Billy could see Crooked Joe talking to John. His father maintained a firm posture, his arms crossed, while the other man gestured nervously. The officers on watch observed the scene closely, ready to intervene if necessary. Crooked Joe still tried to argue, but the arrival of Detective O'Malley, who had apparently been alerted by the officers, ended the discussion. The man left hurriedly, leaving behind only more evidence of his suspicious activities. The next morning, the town awoke in a frenzy. The town square was decorated for the competition, with flags and colorful banners fluttering in the wind. Horses of all breeds and values were prepared in their respective temporary stables, while their owners exchanged nervous glances. Billy, still under the attentive care of his mother, watched everything from a privileged spot, the porch of Mrs. Vanderbilt's house, who had insisted that the family stay under her protection during the event. From there, he had a perfect view of the main arena and the behind-the-scenes activity of the competition. His camera recorded every moment, the participants arriving, the judges preparing, the bleachers filling up. But his eyes were especially attentive to any sign of Victor or his cronies. John prepared Star with extra care that morning. The old horse, recovered from the effort of the previous day, seemed especially alert, as if she understood the importance of the moment. Her coat shone in the morning sun, and the new saddle, a gift from Mrs. Vanderbilt, gave her an air of dignity. A sudden commotion at the entrance to the fairgrounds caught everyone's attention. A black limousine, identical to Victor's, had arrived. But who got out of the vehicle was not the actor, but rather his lawyer, carrying a briefcase full of documents. Billy continued photographing, his lens capturing details that others might miss. The lawyer's poorly disguised nervousness, the knowing glances between certain participants, the suspicious movement of people known to be close to Victor. "They have no idea about the real story," commented Mrs. Vanderbilt, serving lemonade to everyone on the porch. "But they soon will. Today isn't just about a competition, it's about the truth coming to light." The sun was already high when the first chords of the national anthem announced the official start of the event. Billy adjusted his camera one last time, preparing to record what promised to be the most important day in the recent history of Harmony Creek. In the makeshift stable below the porch, Star whinnied softly, as if giving her own signal that she was ready for what was to come. The competition began with the presentations of the beginner categories. From Mrs. Vanderbilt's porch, Billy recorded every moment through his lens, but his attention was divided between the competitors and the suspicious movements behind the scenes. Detective O'Malley maintained constant communication through a discreet radio with his men scattered throughout the event. The tension increased when Victor's lawyer reappeared, this time accompanied by Crooked Joe and other men of intimidating appearance. They circulated among the participants, whispering words that Billy could not hear, but whose effect was visible on the worried faces of the competitors. Mary squeezed Billy's hand, feeling her son's anxiety. "It's going to be all right," she whispered, although her own voice betrayed her concern. It was then that something unexpected happened. A growing murmur began to spread through the crowd as a familiar figure emerged from the VIP area. Victor Monroe himself, wearing an impeccable suit and his signature television commercial smile. Detective O'Malley immediately grabbed his radio, giving rapid instructions to his team. Mrs. Vanderbilt, who was watching everything with keen eyes, noticed an important detail. Billy adjusted his camera, focusing on Victor. Through the lens, he could see that, despite the confident smile, the actor was sweating more than usual, and his eyes moved nervously, scanning the crowd. Suddenly, a commotion near the judges' area caught everyone's attention. Two competitors were arguing heatedly, their voices rising above the general murmur. Detective O'Malley quickly approached, his radio in hand. As if to confirm his words, Crooked Joe rushed to Victor's side, whispering something in his ear. The actor's face paled visibly, and he began to move toward the exit. Billy continued photographing, his camera recording every crucial moment. He captured the exact instant when Victor, realizing that he was surrounded, tried to pass his briefcase to one of his cronies. He also recorded when one of the undercover officers intercepted the delivery, causing a small commotion that quickly turned into chaos. The crowd, realizing that something was wrong, began to stir. It was at this moment that Mrs. Vanderbilt's voice, amplified by a microphone that she had provided, cut through the air. All heads turned to the porch where she stood. Billy saw his father emerge from the stable mounted on Star, ready to defend the truth that his son had helped to discover. The old horse stood firm and dignified, as if she understood the importance of the moment. Victor, seeing his empire of lies crumble, made a last desperate attempt to escape. But for every exit he tried, he found an officer blocking his path. The siege was closing, and the truth, like a river dammed for too long, was about to overflow. The chaos that followed Mrs. Vanderbilt's announcement transformed the quiet competition into a scene of explosive revelations. Victor Monroe, cornered and with no way out, finally showed his true face. His actor's charm gave way to an expression of fury and despair when he realized that there was no longer any escape. "You don't understand," he shouted, his voice echoing through the arena. "I was bringing money to this backward town. I was giving you what you wanted, a show, a chance to dream." "It was all rigged from the beginning," confessed Crooked Joe, his voice trembling. "The bets, the results, even the accidents that happened to some competitors. Everything was planned to maximize profits." John, still mounted on Star, approached the center of the arena. His figure, although simple, carried a dignity that contrasted sharply with the despair of Victor and his cronies. The old horse walked with firm steps, her head held high, as if she understood that she represented something greater than a simple competition. Mary, next to Billy on the porch, had tears in her eyes. Her son continued photographing, recording every moment of that historic transformation in Harmony Creek. The camera that had almost cost him his life now served as a witness to the triumph of truth. Detective O'Malley coordinated the arrest of those involved with a silent efficiency. One by one, Victor, Crooked Joe, and his main cronies were handcuffed and escorted out of the arena. The briefcase that Victor was carrying was opened, revealing documents that proved years of fraud and manipulations. Mrs. Vanderbilt, maintaining her elegant posture even amidst the turmoil, took the microphone again. "From today on, Harmony Creek's equestrian competition returns to being what it should always have been, a celebration of honest work, of the connection between man and animal, of the true tradition of our land." One by one, the competitors who had been coerced began to speak out, sharing their stories of threats and pressure. Each revelation provoked new waves of indignation in the audience, but also a growing feeling of liberation. Billy captured with his camera the moment when several participants approached his father, apologizing for having doubted him and Star. The old horse received respectful caresses, her role as a hero now doubled. Not only had she saved Billy from the river, but her story had helped to expose the whole truth. Mary hugged Billy tightly, feeling her son's heart beat fast against her chest. "He is special," she replied, "just like everyone who chooses to do the right thing, even when it's difficult." The afternoon sun was beginning to set when the last details were sorted out. The competition would be reorganized in the coming weeks, this time with external supervision and new security protocols. The money from the fraudulent bets would be returned, and a special fund would be created to help the families most affected by the scheme. As the crowd began to disperse, Billy took one last photograph. Through his lens, he captured his father dismounting Star, the last rays of sun creating a golden halo around them both. It was an image of hope, of new beginnings, of the triumph of honesty over greed. Billy lowered his camera and smiled, a rare and genuine smile that lit up his tired face. The truth had won, and he had helped make it happen, not with force or violence, but with his unique sensitivity to seeing the world through his lens. In the weeks that followed the revelations of the competition, Harmony Creek underwent a profound transformation. The small town, previously known only for its equestrian event, now appeared in newspapers across the country as an example of how truth and justice could triumph over corruption. Billy observed these changes through his camera, recording moments that told the story of the community's reconstruction. His photographs, previously focused only on natural beauty and horses, now also captured the essence of renewal, people gathering to help each other, old rivalries being set aside for the common good. Mrs. Vanderbilt had transformed her estate into a temporary community center where families affected by Victor's scheme could seek help and guidance. Mary was rehired not only as a housekeeper, but as the coordinator of the social project that Mrs. Vanderbilt was developing. John, in turn, received more and more invitations to work as a trainer. His story of integrity, along with Starr's impressive demonstration of loyalty, had spread throughout the region. He chose to accept a position at the new Community Equestrian Center, where he could teach not only about horses, but about the importance of honesty and perseverance. Detective O'Malley remained present in the family's life, no longer as an investigator, but as a dear friend. He had organized a special exhibition of Billy's photographs at the town's cultural center, presenting not only the images that had helped unravel the scheme, but also others that showed the beauty and strength of the community. Each photograph tells a story, explained the detective during the exhibition's opening, and through Billy's special eyes, we can see not only what happened, but also what we can become. Starr, the hero of two stories, became a local celebrity. Children visited the stable to meet the horse that had saved her young owner and helped save the town. Billy photographed these encounters, capturing the gentleness with which the old horse received her admirers, especially the children with special needs who identified with Billy's story. On a particularly significant afternoon, a new sign was installed at the entrance to the town. Under the name Harmony Creek, there was now a photograph of Starr, taken by Billy, and the words, "Where truth and loyalty build the future." The sign's unveiling brought together the entire community, and Billy was there, recording every moment with his inseparable camera. "You changed our town, son," said John, hugging Billy during the ceremony, "not only for what you discovered, but for showing us that being different is not a weakness, it's a strength." Billy continued photographing, but now his images were regularly published in the local newspaper. His unique perspective, his ability to capture details that others did not see, became a way to document the town's transformation. Each photograph told a story of overcoming, of reconstruction, of hope. Mary, watching her son work, noticed how he seemed more confident, more connected to the people around him. Autism continued to be part of who he was, but now the community saw him first as the young photographer who had helped save the town, the boy who saw the world in a special and valuable way. One afternoon, while Billy was photographing Starr in the pasture, a rainbow appeared on the horizon. The boy captured the exact moment when the old horse raised her head against the colorful sky, creating an image that perfectly symbolized the transformation of Harmony Creek. After the storm came not only the calm, but the promise of even brighter days. "Sometimes," said Mrs. Vanderbilt, watching Billy work, "we need the eyes of a child to show us the right way. And sometimes we need the loyalty of a horse to remind us of what really matters." The town breathed a new air, as if it had awakened from a long sleep. People smiled more, helped each other more, and most importantly, believed more in each other. And at the center of this transformation was a boy with his camera, a horse with her loyal heart, and a family that had chosen to do the right thing, even when it seemed impossible. A year had passed since the events that transformed Harmony Creek. The town flourished not only in name, but in spirit. On an especially beautiful spring morning, Billy adjusted his camera for another day of work. It was no longer the same old camera. Mrs. Vanderbilt had presented him with new professional equipment, although the old camera occupied a place of honor on his bookshelf, a reminder of the power of truth and courage. The Community Equestrian Center where John now worked as head instructor, was decorated for a special occasion. It was the first anniversary of the Photographing Dreams program, created by Billy to teach photography to other children with autism and special needs. The project had started small, with just 3 students, but now it served more than 20 children, each discovering their own unique way to see and record the world. Star, now officially retired from competitions, had a special role in the program. The old horse showed extraordinary patience with the children, as if she understood that each one had their own pace and their own way of expressing themselves. Billy often photographed these moments of connection between the animal and his young students, creating a precious archive of small daily miracles. "You created something very special here, son," said Mary, helping to organize the photographs for the exhibition that would mark the project's anniversary. Each image told a different story: a non-verbal girl who communicated through her photos of birds, a boy with cerebral palsy who discovered that he could create art even with his physical limitations, young people who once felt isolated, finding a way to share their vision of the world. Detective O'Malley, now a frequent visitor to the center, admired the mural of photographs that covered one of the walls. "You know, Billy," he commented, "when we started that investigation a year ago, I thought we were just after a criminal scheme. I didn't imagine that we were, in fact, paving the way for something much bigger." The transformation of Harmony Creek went beyond the equestrian center. The community fund created with the money recovered from Victor's scheme had financed several social projects. The town, which once lived only for its annual competition, was now known for its inclusive initiatives and its community spirit. Mrs. Vanderbilt, who chaired the community council, had transformed her estate into a permanent cultural center. Mary coordinated the social projects with a competence that surprised only those who didn't truly know her. The doors that once separated the different social classes of the town were now open, building bridges instead of walls. In the exhibition area, one photograph in particular caught the eye. It showed Star under the rainbow, that image that Billy had captured on the day the town began its transformation. Next to it, a series of portraits showed the smiling faces of the project students, each holding their own camera, each telling their own story. "Sometimes," said John, watching the visitors arriving for the celebration, "the greatest treasures are in the most unlikely places. Who would have thought that an old camera in the hands of a special boy could change so much people's lives?" Billy continued photographing, recording every moment of the celebration. His lens captured not only images but feelings, the pride in his parents' eyes, the serene satisfaction on Mrs. Vanderbilt's face, the pure joy of his students as they showed their work, the quiet dignity of Star, observing everything from her special place in the yard. The sun was beginning to set when the last photograph of the day was taken. It was a group picture with all the children of the project, their families, Star in the center, and the staff of the equestrian center. In the smiling faces, one saw the reflection of a community that had learned that differences are not barriers, but bridges to a deeper understanding. Billy put away his camera and walked to Star, hugging the neck of his old friend. The horse whinnied softly, her muzzle gently brushing the boy's face. Together, they watched the darkening sky, painted with the colors of twilight. In Harmony Creek, the lights began to turn on, one by one, like earthly stars. But now they were lights of hope, of possible dreams, of truths that no longer needed to hide. The small town had discovered that its true wealth was not in competitions or prizes, but in the hearts of its people, and in the courage of a boy who, through his camera, had taught everyone a valuable lesson, that each of us has a unique and special way of seeing the world, and that in these differences lies the true beauty of life.